Overall, the initial protests over these ICE raids have clearly morphed into something larger. The president seeking this conflict, seeking a chance to use what are clearly extraordinary powers, unusual powers, rarely deployed federal powers, while overruling the sitting governor of the state. Democrats have been pushing back. They are taking him to court, as mentioned. But overall, in what is still an early period in the second term of this unusual Trump presidency, the nation is facing a wider reckoning over a president who confesses what are improper goals, recently arresting some opponents in the Democratic Party because they disagree with him. In a case that, again, a lot's going on, you're forgiven if it's hard to keep track, but that case, that arrest, very dramatic, of a Democratic mayor in his own city, dropped. The case fell apart. The lawyers tasked with defending the arrest admitted a type of wrongdoing in court. That mayor is now suing the Trump administration, but that would appear to be an improper use of force by evidence of the fact that they didn't even stick with the case. But remember, this week, as we see soldiers in the streets, the president is threatening the same type of arrest against the California governor in this clash, Governor Newsom. He's basically said, bring it on. But that is where we are. And Trump is leaning into this very controversy over the use of these powers in the Guard, warning of big force against protesters, which would sound like people exercising constitutional rights if they peacefully protest. But that's his warning to people who might come to the planned D.C. parade this weekend.
If there's any protester who wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force.
Let's take this seriously. Protests met with big force. The public warning from the sitting president. This isn't campaign rhetoric. This isn't some lurching, sloppy statement somewhere along the line being taken out of context. This is being said right now by your president as he tests whether he can get away with putting Marines in the streets. And not just any streets, the streets of California, which he has publicly said he views as the type of place filled with the type of Americans that he wants to patrol, that he views as some type of opponent. But like every president, Donald Trump took an oath in public to uphold the Constitution. And so we can report as news, even if it sounds like bad news, that the president is quite blatantly undercutting the oath he took today by vowing big force for people exercising constitutional rights to assemble and protest and speak while using this rare, courts haven't said whether it's illegal or not, but rare instance of extreme military-style federal force in California. You have the statement matched by the action. This week's clash, which clearly is not an overnight event, is one of Trump's choosing. What started with deportation powers is now about limits potentially on Trump's power. The president does not have the legal power to police daily life in states and cities. That is what states do under federalism. That's why you have state officers, state representatives that you vote for, local police, not federal agents running through your home. The president also doesn't have the legal power to silence or threaten dissent, although it is clear that he welcomes a clash on those terms. As for the actual protests, let's tell you here in the news what we know. They have occurred now across roughly 4 days. Hundreds of people have gathered in different locations. On Monday night, there were about 100 arrests. There were some violent incidents. The situation required law enforcement, which traditionally patrols these areas. But these gatherings, to be clear, although there are some dramatic moments in footage, just by the scale, and we've covered this and we have our reporters on the ground there, these gatherings are not anywhere near Los Angeles' largest security challenges. This clash has now brought out more protests in other places, people deciding to speak up, to be counted, that they see what's happening in Los Angeles. And we've seen this in San Francisco, Austin, Atlanta. People are taking action. They want to stand, they say, many of them from the signs and the coverage we have, against an effort by Donald Trump to take a showdown that involved a lot of peaceful protest and, as mentioned, some prosecutable incidents. But for him to try to take that and turn it into the rationale to deploy the National Guard or now the Marines in these other places, people are standing up. And this is a democracy. So against pressure, there is still, until and unless the Constitution actually breaks and we live in a different kind of country, there is obviously, this is just a fact, a role for the people to stand up or stand down, to get engaged or sit it out. But it's a decision in a democracy people still make, which is a point that our colleague Rachel Maddow made on MSNBC just last night, which we can observe drew some headlines about how to respond to this test that President Trump clearly wants.
Will he succeed? Will he get what he wants? And the answer to that will not be found by looking at him or by watching his actions. The answer to that question will come from the people of this country. The most important story of our time is this one. What is this country going to allow him to do?
As the nation observes Marines working on the ground in Los Angeles tonight, many are really wondering, is this even legal? Now, California officials think these deployments are not legal. They are pressing the point in court. They're intending to get the judicial branch to side with them in what is, among other things now, a clash between state and federal power. Late today, California is seeking emergency relief to try to stop these deployments we've been telling you about. A new filing states that Trump's federal antagonization with soldiers in the streets has already caused, quote, real and irreparable damage to L.A. Now, that statement there, which is a claim in a lawsuit, right, that refers to basically one of the required standards to even get a judge to intervene on an emergency basis. California is arguing Trump's deployment must be stopped immediately. It's a push that comes as the president has now doubled the total guard forces to 4,000. Under law, it's pretty simple. U.S. troops cannot be deployed for domestic law enforcement. You can't send the army to someone's house to do a drug search or to look for things. That's always been the case. In fact, it is a key line to prevent any potential abuse of military powers against U.S. citizens. And there's really only one rare instance where you could have an exception to that. And that's if there's basically the kind of insurrection or rebellion that could then be invoked to suspend what otherwise is the limit on the military from operating on our streets. Now, if you're thinking, okay, well, that sounds rare, it is. Indeed, in our entire modern era, the only violent effort to overthrow the U.S. government on par with an insurrection in modern history was the recent MAGA effort to overturn the loss of then outgoing President Trump in 2020. Republican leader McConnell called that effort a violent insurrection. And in court, it rather infamously led to sedition convictions, which this president, the beneficiary of that effort, later pardoned on his very first day in office. The New York Times notes that when violent protests originate from the right, Trump has chosen to downplay the violence or suggest the protesters have a noble cause. When it comes from whatever he deems the left, Trump expresses open desire for law enforcement and the military to harshly crack down on them. And so what we're witnessing right now is the extension of this upside-down land. In other words, it is an insurrection that would justify only under our legal history this kind of exception. And the last time we had an insurrection, you may recall, President was Trump leaving office. So at that time, he appeared to welcome, court, praise, and later pardon those violent and horrific attacks on police, while now he wants to use the rhetoric and the language of law and order as if anyone would believe it who lived through that now convicted sedition.
They spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
Donald Trump is saying he doesn't like it when they do bad things to police, and even an act like spitting will be met with hitting. But of course, it was a lot of hitting of police that he formally embraced and condoned. People who'd been convicted of attacks on police were let out of jail very early, let out of prison very early, because he said it's all good. And that has to be relevant here when A, you have legal claims involving the exception of insurrection, and B, a country looking up and saying, what is this all about? Is this really about public safety and order? Is this even really about immigration? Or is it about an obvious, proven double standard of a sitting president who has embraced some people who attack police while then turning around and claiming he's concerned about that very thing? Now, the use of the Marines is extremely rare. Governor Newsom vowing a suit over this deployment, saying it's a blatant abuse of power, which he posted online. Under law, it's very clear. You need an actual rebellion. We're talking about a military-level challenge to the government. Think civil war or violent ongoing organized insurrection. The AP notes that officials have scrambled to even establish new rules to guide the U.S. Marines in how to patrol citizens because, as I just told you, it's not something they even normally are supposed to do. So they don't have a bunch of rules for it because they don't patrol American streets. There are documents that state warning shots would be prohibited, troops would be directed to de-escalate, but they could also act in self-defense, the documents say. And so the question is, why are we making up these rules on the fly? And does it sound like a good idea to thrust Marines who were recruited and trained to go patrol abroad to now figure out when and how to shoot Americans in, quote, self-defense?
Jacob, I'm going to cut you off because I promised we were going to go to the governor as soon as we had audio and video, and we're going to go to the governor. I so appreciate you bringing us this peaceful protest.
Constitutional right to free speech and assembly, to protest their government's actions. In turn, the state of California and the city and county of Los Angeles sent our police officers to help keep the peace. And with some exceptions, they were successful. Like many states, California is no stranger to this sort of unrest. We manage it regularly and with our own law enforcement. But this, again, was different. What then ensued was the use of tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, federal agents detaining people and undermining their due process rights. Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. That's when the downward spiral began. He doubled down on his dangerous National Guard deployment by fanning the flames even harder. And the president, he did it on purpose. As the news spread throughout LA, anxiety for family and friends ramped up. Protests started again. By night, several dozen lawbreakers became violent and destructive. They vandalized property. They tried to assault police officers. Many of you have seen the video clips of cars burning on cable news. If you incite violence, I want to be clear about this. If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account. That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated, full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Again, thanks to our law enforcement officers and the majority of Angelenos who protested peacefully, the situation was winding down and was concentrated in just a few square blocks downtown. But that's not what Donald Trump wanted. He again chose escalation. He chose more force. He chose theatrics over public safety. He federalized another 2,000 Guard members. He deployed more than 700 active U.S. Marines. These are the men and women trained for foreign combat, not domestic law enforcement. We honor their service. We honor their bravery. But we do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces, not in L.A., not in California, not anywhere. We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities. And that seems to be the entire point. California will keep fighting. We'll keep fighting on behalf of our people, all of our people, including in the courts. Just yesterday, we filed a legal challenge to Donald Trump's reckless deployment of American troops to a major American city. Today, we sought an emergency court order to stop the use of the American military to engage in law enforcement activities across Los Angeles. If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe. Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control. And by the way, Trump, he's not opposed to lawlessness and violence as long as it serves him. What more evidence do we need than January 6th? I ask everyone, take time, reflect on this perilous moment. A president who wants to be bound by no law or constitution, perpetuating a unified assault on American traditions. This is a president who in just over 140 days has fired government watchdogs that could hold him accountable for corruption and fraud. He's declared a war on culture, on history, on science, on knowledge itself. Databases, quite literally, are vanishing. He's delegitimizing news organizations, and he's assaulting the First Amendment. And the threat of defunding them, at threat, he's dictating what universities themselves can teach. He's targeting law firms and the judicial branch that are the foundations of an orderly and civil society. He's calling for a sitting governor to be arrested for no other reason than to, in his own words, for getting elected. And we all know this Saturday, he's ordering our American heroes, the United States military, and forcing them to put on a vulgar display to celebrate his birthday, just as other failed dictators have done in the past. Look, this isn't just about protests here in Los Angeles. When Donald Trump sought blanket authority to commandeer the National Guard, he made that order apply to every state in this nation. This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. He's taking a wrecking ball to our founding fathers' historic project. 3 co-equal branches of independent government. There are no longer any checks and balances. Congress is nowhere to be found. Speaker Johnson has completely abdicated that responsibility. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. The founding fathers, they didn't live and die to see this kind of moment. It's time for all of us to stand up. Justice Brandeis, he said it best. In a democracy, the most important office, with all due respect, Mr. President, is not the presidency, and it's certainly not governor. The most important office is office of citizen. At this moment, we all need to stand up and be held to account, a higher level of accountability. If you exercise your First Amendment rights, please do it peacefully. I know many of you are feeling deep anxiety, stress, and fear. But I want you to know that you are the antidote to that fear and that anxiety. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
There was exactly one day in Donald Trump's time as president when he needed to call in federal troops, where he was empowered without checking with anyone to call in federal troops in the place where no governor is involved, Washington, D.C., and Donald Trump didn't do it. Rioters beat.
We need to hold the doors of the Capitol. I need public support.
Donald Trump pardoned every one of those Trump supporters who were trying to kill those police officers. Every one of those Trump supporters who wanted to go and kill Mike Pence. For 187 minutes that day, Donald Trump did absolutely nothing, and he never, ever, for a second, considered trying to stop his supporters from trying to beat and kill police officers. It was the Vice President of the United States who technically, without authority, took over and ordered the American military into action on January 6th at the Capitol. General Mark Milley testified to the January 6th committee. Vice President Pence was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders. There was no question about that, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere, but he was very animated, very direct, very firm to Secretary Miller, get the military down here, get the Guard down here, put down this situation, etc. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn wishes the troops got there sooner.
Until then, I had never seen anyone physically assault Capitol Police or MPD, let alone witness mass assaults being perpetrated on law enforcement officers. I witnessed the rioters using all kinds of weapons against officers, including flagpoles, metal bike racks that they had torn apart, and various kinds of projectiles. Officers were being bloodied in the fighting. Many were screaming, and many were blinded and coughing from chemical irritants being sprayed in their faces. I sat down on a bench in the rotunda with a friend of mine who was also a black Capitol Police officer and told him about the racial slurs I endured. I became very emotional and began yelling, how the blank could something like this happen? Is this America? I began sobbing.
Joining us now is former U.S. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I have been thinking about you since yesterday and before, actually, as we see Donald Trump playing this stunt of suddenly caring about law and order and preserving law and order by sending in the troops where they're absolutely not needed for any purpose we've been able to see whatsoever, compared to the day you needed the troops and he didn't send them. And I just want to give you an opportunity to respond based on your own experience to what you're feeling about what you're seeing now in Los Angeles.
Yeah, sure, Lawrence. Thank you for having me on. And listen, you know, it's easy to immediately start talking about my experience on January 6th, but there are real people in Los Angeles now that are suffering, that are being assaulted and unfairly targeted. And that's where my thoughts are with those individuals right now. I've seen videos of them people being trampled by horses or beat by police officers and peacefully protesting. And let's be 100% clear. In no way is it okay to any time assault a law enforcement officer or anybody for that matter. So I am glad for the statements that were made by the FBI director, the attorney general, just saying no assaulting police officers, you're going to go to jail. I just wish that applied to the officers on January 6th. In DC, it's a little bit more ambiguous how the National Guard gets deployed. You know, there's not a governor of Washington, D.C., and D.C. is under federal control. However, in California, it's very clear who's in control of the National Guard. And I believe Gavin Newsom to be very competent and say when they do need help and that he will reach out. If you think back to just the fires that took place, he was not shy to ask for help there. But Donald Trump saw an opportunity to go after people in marginalized communities, people that vehemently oppose his policies and the way that they are targeting minorities and just wanting to do whatever they can to get people out of this country that don't look like them. And it's sad to say that a lot of Black and brown people are the targets of these ICE raids. And it's really unfortunate.
Some of the images we've seen today of some of the arrests that occurred today are among the most peaceful kinds of arrests you could ever imagine. They really did look like the arrests Jane Fonda was submitting to at the Capitol a few years ago. People just standing there, putting their hands behind their backs, obviously symbolic arrests for them. These were people. And how would you compare that to what you were encountering on January 6th?
Well, not even just Jane Fonda. I was there for the numerous Fire Drill Fridays when Jane Fonda and several other activists got arrested civilly, to include John Lewis. The good trouble John Lewis was arrested by the United States Capitol Police officers in a civil, peaceful way. Now, I'm not comparing the individuals in Los Angeles to John Lewis, but the way that the video that you just showed, those individuals peacefully submitting, and all of them surrounded by Los Angeles Police Department. I believe the LAPD put out a statement and thanked the community for the efforts in the way that they were going about conducting their business. Now, listen, let's be clear. I'll say this 100 times. If there are bad actors, which there are a lot of times, and you see events like this, there are bad actors. They need to be held accountable. They do not need to be celebrated. They do not need to be praised, but they are. In the name of Donald Trump. Let's go back to 2016 and those elections. And a lot of people of Donald Trump has always said, if you see these protesters, knock the hell out of them, and we'll pay your legal expenses. This isn't something new that Donald Trump is doing. He's always been in favor of violence as long as it occurs in his name.
Governor Newsom tonight in his statement made it very clear he fully supports the police arresting the people who were involved in a couple of cars being set on fire. They were driverless cars that they have in Los Angeles as driverless taxis that we see them around Los Angeles. And the governor completely, obviously opposed to that, and that the LAPD was fully capable of handling that.
They absolutely were capable of that. And like you pointed out earlier in your program, the amount of people that were being arrested, the amount of people that were protesting could have easily been handled. It was easily handled by the Los Angeles Police Department. And it just goes back to show the hypocrisy of not only Donald Trump, but his supporters and his mouthpieces in Congress and the Senate, and individuals like Tommy Tuberville and just those individuals that are calling for the arrest of Gavin Newsom. Like, Donald Trump, we begged you for help on January the 6th, and it didn't happen. The help didn't come when we asked you for it. Now you have a state that's not asking for any help, but you feel the need to step in and intervene. And it's only for one reason, to flex your authority, that unchecked authority. And it's dangerous because, listen, there are police officers out there that are waiting for the opportunity to have the ability to do whatever they want at the expense of the president told me so. So how does the Supreme Court justify that as an official act? If a police officer goes out there and violates somebody's civil rights, but they said they did it because the president told them to. So was that an official act by the president right now, telling a police officer to violate somebody's civil rights who was peacefully protesting? There are videos of protesters out there in Los Angeles that are getting beat and clubbed. There's an Australian reporter that was shot by rubber bullets. They're just firing in the crowd indiscriminately, and that's escalating by the law enforcement officials there. Now, law enforcement always has a tough job to do, and it's important that they are able to do their job, but they are not need to be out there escalating things.
Former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Lawrence.
It was a story that I saw, I was alerted, I stopped and read it. It's an incredible body of reporting. Take me through it.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we really looked at what has changed with ICE enforcement leading up to this and the marching orders that they're getting from the White House. Stephen Miller, as you mentioned earlier, had this meeting in late May where he told agents from around the country that not enough people were being deported and that their focus should not be on criminals and on the target list that they've traditionally used, but on just going out and finding anyone who's in the country illegally and deporting them. And he said, why don't you try Home Depot and why don't you try 7-Eleven? And lo and behold, here, just weeks later, we saw the targeting of Home Depots in LA.
Elizabeth, what is the, is there anyone in the room, I guess, that would point out the lack of precedent or the lack of appropriateness for Stephen Miller to be directing law enforcement activity from the West Wing?
I can't really speak to the appropriateness of it, but we lay out in the story a number of things that have changed operationally at ICE for different reasons. Some directives from above and some things that have just changed sort of on a grassroots level on the ground. And that includes agents no longer needing to stick to their targets, being able to arrest anyone they encounter, being able to arrest people in sensitive locations like courtrooms, schools, hospitals. We're seeing them frequently do masked arrests now and really using these splashy shows of force.
Elizabeth, let me read from that part of the reporting. You write, federal agents make warrantless arrests. Masked agents take people into custody without identifying themselves. Plainclothes agents in at least a dozen cities have arrested migrants who showed up to their court hearings. Across the U.S., people suspected of being in the country illegally are disappearing into the federal detention system without notice to families or lawyers, according to attorneys, witnesses, and officials. In Coral Springs, Florida, at least 8 agents in tactical gear, shields and rifles, surrounded a home with guns raised to arrest a father with no criminal history. In Irvine, California, ICE agents drove a phalanx of military vehicles in the Orange County suburbs to arrest a person, though not for illegal immigration. They were seeking a resident's son who had allegedly posted flyers alerting neighbors to the presence of ICE agents. How widespread and how lacking in facts and evidence before all these kinds of aggressive tactics take place is the current operation?
You know, we're seeing these examples pop up all over the country. We're seeing them pop up in a lot of different contexts. And in many cases, the Trump administration and ICE officials themselves are not hiding what they're doing. They're proud of it. They're posting on social media videos of them smashing car windows and surrounding people with guns and the like. And there's a reason for that. It's a strategy to convince people to leave the country, to convince people not to come here in the first place. And they are leaning on these splashy shows of force. So I don't think we've seen the end of them.
And now joining us is Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Mayor Bass, thanks so much for taking the time. President Trump says that if he didn't send in the troops, your city would be burning to the ground right now. His words. There were arrests for violence, like throwing a Molotov cocktail at police officers. Did LA authorities have the situation under control?
Yes, and I will tell you something. He sent out a message Saturday night saying that the reason why the protests and the vandalism was quelled was because of the brilliant work of the National Guard. The National Guard was not even in Los Angeles. They had not even been deployed at that time. As your guests previously said, and I so appreciated their comments, the National Guard has one mission, and that is to protect a building. And that has nothing to do with the protests that you're seeing in the streets. So that's 100 soldiers. What are another 1,000 going to do protecting one building? And then he's going to send in the Marines to do what? I don't know what these people are going to do. As your previous guest said, these are several isolated streets in downtown Los Angeles. It is not even all of downtown Los Angeles. So painting this like this is, 1992 all over again when it was citywide civil unrest has nothing to do with the situation that you're looking at now. And frankly, it's just provocative. It was almost as though the administration wanted to see chaos in this city. I appealed and said, please do not do this, because all it's going to do is agitate people. And that's exactly what you're saying.
You mentioned the 1992 situation that was after the Rodney King verdict, and we saw those riots in the streets. But you have accused the administration of using your city as a test case for taking over local control. So far, it appears these troops are only guarding federal buildings. Do you see the administration already encroaching on your authority?
No. What I was referring to is they took over the authority from the governor for the National Guard. And so federalizing troops when the troops were not requested. I didn't make a request, the chief of police or the sheriff. The sheriff is the one who officially makes the request. No one asked for help. Yes, there was violence. Yes, there was vandalism. But we have a law enforcement community here beyond Los Angeles Police Department. We have sheriffs. We have 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles. So mutual aid from any of those departments could have happened, and when they were needed, it did happen. A few days later, the chief did ask for mutual aid, but we did not need national troops.
I want to play what Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said about you and your city this weekend.
I served with her in Congress before she was ever mayor, and she is a train wreck of a mayor now that is endorsing these kind of activities, has allowed her city to be completely devastated with crime, and now she's holding press conferences talking about the fact that people have the right to peacefully protest and that they're a city of immigrants. Well, they're not a city of immigrants, they're a city of criminals.
Oh, wow.
Mayor, what's your response?
Well, sometimes when such outlandish statements are made, they're just beneath the dignity of her office. And what she is saying is absolutely ridiculous. We are not a city of criminals. We are a city where crime has gone down significantly. Does crime still take place? Of course. We have a number of issues here, and we have been resolving them. But the idea that we are a city of criminals is just very unfortunate.
Meantime, more federal forces are arriving. But here's what President Trump said all the way back in 2020. Listen.
Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that, even in a Portland case. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor.
Again, that was his stance in 2020. So what's changed?
Well, I don't think anything has changed. I think, well, maybe this. Maybe he does not have the individuals in the White House who tried to tell him to put on the brakes. Maybe that's what has changed, but I don't know. What I do know is what is happening in Los Angeles. And until the raids stop, I am going to be concerned about fear and tension in the city, people going to work and not knowing whether or not they're going to be able to get home that evening. We have people who are showing up, who are in the country legally, showing up to the immigration office for their annual appointments, maybe sometimes even bringing their families, and then getting detained. So the raids do not help our city. We are a city of immigrants, and there are sectors of the workforce that are dominated by immigrant labor. And so the economy of our city does not need this. We are 12 months away from the World Cup, and we're trying to bring our city together to beautify our city. And look at what has happened now. The White House instigated this by having ICE raids in our city. They are telling us that they're going to have raids for the next 30 days. Right. So you know, then that has a whole sector of the population on pins and needles. You were talking about someone doing childcare, a nanny in an individual's home, or your landscaper, your gardener, you know, people who are small business owners, people who contribute to our economy in multiple ways. And so to disrupt that hurts the economy of Los Angeles and is the opposite of what we need to be doing to prepare for the World Cup.
We were told there were, in fact, 5 more immigration raids just yesterday alone in the Los Angeles County area. Border Czar Tom Homan says anyone, including you, could be arrested if you cross the line and impede law enforcement or knowingly harbor undocumented immigrants. Are you concerned that you could be arrested?
No, I'm not concerned that I could be arrested. And that's just an unbelievably irresponsible statement for somebody to make who I was on the phone with an hour before the statement was made. So he is referencing if I were to intervene, maybe hit a federal officer or something. It's just ridiculous. It's like the other comment that was made. Do you spend your time, responding to comments that really rob dignity out of the offices that they serve in?
If you've been on the phone with Homan or other administration officials, what is the level of coordination at this point?
Well, there's not coordination. I mean, I had one conversation with him, and again, I was trying to explain to him why we did not need federal troops in Los Angeles, and obviously my conversation didn't go anywhere.
What do local business owners need to know if ICE shows up at their workplace?
Well, I think it's very important for people to know their rights. And when you're talking about business owners, they could be undocumented as well as their employees. But you don't have to cooperate. You can, remain silent. There's a know your rights, a series of things that individuals can do and business owners. But, you've seen pictures of people around the country. I saw a man in a car. And he was waiting for his attorneys, and ICE just broke the windows of his car and dragged him out. Now, we've not seen anything like that here in Los Angeles. I certainly hope that we do not. But what is normal practice, like if you are detained, you're allowed to see your attorney who is representing you, for your family to know where you are. This is not happening in this case.
Mayor, before I let you go, there is the immigration raids, which, of course, kicked off the unrest and the upheaval. People want to resist what is happening to their friends and their neighbors and other members of the community who are contributing in their community. And then there's the issue of the National Guard troops moving in, the Marines being deployed. What do you see as the stakes in this moment?
Well, the stakes in this moment is, number one, our preparation for next year, quelling the fear and the terror that goes through families, people not sure they should go to work, kids not sure they should go to school. It's the sense of uncertainty and fear that is rampant in the city right now. And so to me, what I say to Angelenos is that we absolutely have to stand together in a time like this. We do not want to allow anyone to divide us. We have a strong history of supporting immigrants, and I, as mayor, am going to do everything I can to keep Angelenos safe, regardless of why they came here, when they came here, or how.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, thank you again for your time.